Hi everyone, welcome back to the show. In this episode, we are joined by Dr. Randall Hansen, who is on a mission to help humanity find healing and optimal health by educating and empowering them to be proactive about the food choices that they are making, find a healthy lifestyle designed for them, and heal from past trauma. He's the author of the book, The Healing Revolution Diet, a science-backed approach to heal your gut, reverse chronic illnesses, lose weight, clear your mind, and increase longevity. Be prepared to learn what most people don't understand about the food choices that they make, where we went off track as a society when it comes to our health and what we can do to get back on track, the common lies that we've been told about our food, why personal choice, responsibility, and becoming the CEO of our own health is the antidote to tackling big food and the issues we face today. And of course, much, much more. Before that though, this episode is brought to you by Riverside. Riverside is an online studio platform that's designed to record, edit and share high quality podcasts built for growth from day one. Powered by AI, you can record in 4K video or from your phone and automatically remove filler words such as ums, as, you knows, and many other speech patterns. Built for human conversations, Riverside makes it super easy to start a podcast from anywhere in the world. That sounds great. Ready to start your podcast and share your message with the world? Check out the link in the show note description to learn more about Riverside today and get a 15% discount. That's a 15% discount off a paid subscription. Now, let's dive into my conversation today with Dr. Randall Hansen. Randall, welcome to Raising Consciousness today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Luke, and I just thank you for inviting me here. And I'm just celebrating that someone as young as you is so involved with holistic health. So I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Yeah, me too, especially discovering your work over on LinkedIn and seeing your posts and your content and like diving into it more. Definitely wanted to have this conversation, so thank you for your time. To set kind of like the landscape, we'd love to dive into a little bit of your work and background. So who are you and what do you do?
Ooh, well, it's a loaded question. I consider myself an educator, and I've been an educator most of my life. I got into the wellness field about a little more than 2 decades ago for my own wellness journey. And I read this book that said that sugar was the greatest evil to ever go on the market. And I thought, okay, this woman's a little crazy, and it can't possibly be because even back then, sugar was pretty much prevalent in everything. And I took her challenge, cut out sugar, I think sodas first, sugary sodas, and dropped 20 pounds like in a month and much more energy, less brain fog. And I thought, oh, there's something to this. And I just mostly kept to myself on that. I kept doing research, but I did a few articles here and there. And then about 4 years ago, I just started looking around and just seeing there was such a healing and health, but really a healing crisis going on. My partner is involved with a nonprofit that helps veterans heal from moral injury, PTSD, and other depression, anxiety. And so I started getting more involved with that. I started reading more people like Gabor Mate, looking at trauma and how trauma, whether we know it or not, influences us unless we do the work to resolve that trauma. So I got into the healing space. My first book was on plant medicines and the power of plant medicines to cut through all the BS in our brains that try to block us from integrating this stuff and moving forward. And that led to more your realm, I think, which is my second book, which is Heal, which focuses on holistic healing across all avenues. So I looked at still plant medicines, of course, but then meditation, breath work, nature. Nature has been a big healer for me in my own healing journey, and nutrition. And the more I delved into nutrition, the more I thought when I did the research on plant medicines, I thought the lies about plant medicine and psychedelics were bad, but when I delved into the food area, I had just missed so many things in my own wellness journey that, so many lies or so many things and that have been done over the past really 70 years or so in terms of food. And that brought out to my latest book, The Healing Revolution Diet. But my whole thing is I'm just feel like I'm on this mission to help people find health, find healing, try to live their best and longest lives.
And why does that matter? Why does your work matter for people who are tuning in today?
Well, for them, for you all that are listening, tuning in, it matters because our trauma, there are two things that happen when we have trauma, and I'll give myself as an example. So either trauma fuels us to not superhuman, but to be overachievers. And so because we don't want to face that trauma, so we're always moving, always going. So I was a professor for a number of years, but I went through tenure and up to full professor in rapid time because I just had to keep doing it. I had to keep proving myself. I didn't know why, but I just had this drive. And there's again, some people have amazing success, but then there's going to be a drop. At some point, it's going to implode, and that's what happened to me. And the other side of that trauma is if we just feel like we can't get on track, if every job is a dead end job for us, every relationship is kind of a dead end relationship, if we're living with fear or anger and we don't know where it's coming from, that's trauma, and that needs to be healed. And we also know that this past trauma affects physical health, and mental health. So that's one part of the equation. And then nutrition, oh my gosh, there were just two studies released this past week about ultra processed foods with prostate cancer and colon cancer, and other studies are being done with multiple other cancers, with heart disease, with strokes, with non-fatty liver disease, diabetes. So all these health issues are ramping up, and it's mostly because of our diet and lifestyle. So my thing is, if you want to live a better life, if you're struggling, or even if you're a super achiever, but you're kind of on that razor's edge, I want them to hear this message that there is a better life, a healthier life, a happier life, a joy-filled life that comes from within, not from external factors. And I know it's going to sound weird to some people, but I truly feel that I'm on this divine mission to shout from the rooftops as much as I can, which is why again I appreciate you inviting me on here to expand my audience and have as many people hear this message as possible.
When it comes to our food choices, what do most people need to know about the food choices that they're currently making within the current kind of setup and our current food system, if that makes sense?
Yeah, yeah. And I know Europe and the UK is slightly better than in the States in terms of
Slightly.
slightly, yeah. At least you have some dyes and things that you've definitely said no, not allowed in the food where we still allow them. But I'll say that ultra processed foods, which are these okay, let me backtrack for a second. Almost all food gets processed in some way. When we slice an apple, we're processing that. So we're not talking about simple processing that you would normally think about. In fact, the best description of ultra processed foods I've heard recently was it's food that you cannot make in your own home kitchen because of the process they do to it or the chemicals they add to it that we just don't have access to. But ultra processed foods are, two-thirds of the grocery store, most fast foods, most takeout, takeaway. All the corner stores have ultra processed foods. And the hallmarks of ultra processed foods is that they typically take away the healthy fats, some of the healthy ingredients. They add in seed oils, which we know are toxic. They were designed for industrial use back in the 1900s, and they were converted to human use, which is a little scary. Almost all ultra processed foods have added sugar, so we're consuming just so much more sugar than we ever have before. And then again, as I said, all these chemical additives for preserving, thickening, for colors, for all these different reasons to make the food to what's called the bliss point, the most desirable. You want to keep eating and finish that bag or finish that frozen pizza or whatever it is. And so to me, the number one advice I could give to anyone is just stop eating as much of that ultra processed food as you can. Cook more at home from real ingredients, from scratch cooking, which I know is kind of a lost art, but is something I hope gets revived in the future.
Interesting. Talk to us about the book you've written on this topic, on the topic of nutrition.
Yeah. So the Healing Revolution diet, all my books, I try to make them as straightforward, non-dogmatic as possible. My goal is just, again, as an educator, just to say, here's this information as simply put as possible. There are some amazing books. One of my other mentors is Robert Lustig, who's an MD who does done a lot of work with obesity. And his book is fantastic. His book is metabolical, but he goes down these deep rabbit holes as you would expect an MD to do. And my book says, okay, I'm going to take all these experts, all the latest scientific information, but break it down into kind of, I don't want to say the Reader's Digest version, but an easier version, a simpler version to read. And then I provide resources. If you want to go down this rabbit hole, here's this article in Nature, here's this article in Science, or here's this book you can read to go into a deeper rabbit hole. But I think for me it was, so the book is laid out first, here's what you need to know what's happened in the past 70 years. And crazy things have happened. Like in the 1970s, the two biggest things that sort of affected our food system is the introduction of glyphosate, which is Roundup, which has been proven in so many studies now that it has all these links to cancer and other elements. And I think most of us now have some percentage of glyphosate in our bloodstream because it's so prevalent in the food system. And then also in the 1970s, high fructose corn syrup was commercially developed. And so all of a sudden that became this super cheap, sweeter than sugar, cheaper than sugar. And so so the first part of the book says, here are all these milestones and why you may think, well, if it's sold in my grocery store, it should be safe, right? I mean, that's would be my expectation as well. But the food system has been so compromised over these last decades with this ultra processing to reach this bliss point. We had the tobacco companies buying food companies in the 1980s, and the tobacco companies are fantastic at their marketing efforts as they were with cigarettes, and they did that same thing with the food. And so we set that up first as here's this timeline, and then I cover here are the myths that we typically people are still today talking about. Like I still saw a dietitian today say, limit your egg consumption, only one per day at most, because of the cholesterol, and that's been debunked for 15 years. So I go through these myths and say, here's the evidence. Here's why these are debunked. You can eat eggs again. It's fine. Healthy fats are good. We went to this whole low-fat, non-fat craze that if you look at I was looking at a school lunch the other day, and they had a non-fat chocolate milk. A non-fat chocolate milk had something like 20 ingredients in it, including all these chemicals because they took out all the fats, they had to put on all this other stuff. Whereas a little bottle of milk is just one ingredient, the milk. And so this non-fat craze, affected us, and it's still affecting us today. You see dietitians say, oh, make sure you get your low-fat yogurt or no-fat yogurt, and it's like, no, we need healthy fat. So I have the myths in there, and then I kind of go through the premise of what the principles of the Healing Revolution diet, which are very simple, very straightforward. And then I have tips from different nutritionists. I didn't want to have just my advice in there, so there are different experts in there sharing their tips. And then in all three of my books, one of the hallmarks is I like to have readers share their stories. So there are, I think, 7 stories in this book of people that are sharing their food journey, their health journey, their nutrition journey. And it's just fascinating because to me, the key for health is don't follow one particular fad diet, because I think they come and go, and find the diet that works for you, but also know that diet might change. Like I have someone that in one of the stories, they started vegetarian, went to vegan, did extremely well on vegan for a number of years, then started having some health issues. They started reintroducing salmon for, the good fish first, salmon and tuna, and then they added eventually some beef and chicken, and their health changed and they got better and stronger. I had someone that started on carnivore, did great for a while, and then all of a sudden started having, and so again, for me, so these stories are, I think, beneficial for readers because they can see, again, it's not just this perfect journey toward health. We're going to have ups and downs, we're going to have struggles, and it's just a matter of working your way through it. And I hope these stories are inspirational to say, hey, yeah, look, this person fell 3 or 4 times in their health journey. They got seduced by the advertising, or they got seduced by the medication. Oh yeah, you can still keep eating all you want as long as you take this prescription pill or this injectable or whatever it might be. And it's just a matter of I would love for people to get off as many prescription medications as possible, because food can be our medicine. That's the other premise of this book, is that diabetes is reversible. If we catch Alzheimer's and dementia early enough, it's reversible through food, diet, and lifestyle. Insulin resistance, which is probably the biggest thing that most people have across the world right now, is reversible through diet and lifestyle. You don't need to take medication for it, and yet we're kind of been seduced by going to the doctor and getting that prescription.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there, Randall. I'm curious on what are the principles that you lay out in the book that are part of the diet revolution.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what was the question? I missed the first part of that.
Sorry, you mentioned the
The principles, yeah. So the first principle is, again, just stop dieting. Diets are just don't work for many reasons. They're too restrictive. But find the diet, find that right mix, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But find that right mix that works for you. Eliminate as much as you can refined sugar consumption. We're eating dessert for most of our meals. If you have that coffee drink, it might be 45 grams of sugar in that coffee drink. Sodas, all these things. So just limit it as much as possible. Again, sugar is in. If you start looking at ingredients labels, sugar is in almost every packaged product that we do. Third thing would be focus on healthy fats. These seed oils, are prevalent. Margarines are prevalent. Butter was demonized years ago. We've now seen that no, butter is a healthy fat. Avocados or avocado oil is a healthy fat. Olive oil, healthy fat. The sad part about olive oil and avocado oil is that many producers are cutting those oils with the seed oil. So you have to be really careful. So it's hard because I know it's going to take work by consumers to do this unless there are changes made. Again, the fourth one is that ultra processed foods, eliminate them as much as possible. A fifth one is cook more from scratch. And I include recipes in this book and they're almost all simple recipes that can be cooked and prepped in under an hour. Because I know people are busy. They think, oh, the fast food's only going to take 20 minutes. I can run to the drive-in line, get home, and have the food for the family. But you could do a quiche in that same amount of time, which is much healthier than any fast food. Adding more fiber is the sixth one. I would say, I think studies show that something like 80% of the world's population are not consuming enough fiber. And that fiber comes in nuts, seeds, vegetables. And so I like to look at the macronutrients are typically proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. But people are so scared of carbohydrates, I like to look at it as fats, proteins, and fiber. And because we need that fiber, yes, there's going to be some carbs in that fiber, but our gut microbiome loves fiber, and we can talk about the gut microbiome a little bit too if you want. A seventh one is, whenever possible, try to buy from regenerative agriculture sources. That's the wave of the future. It has the healthiest soil, the healthiest animals, the healthiest plants. So if that's available around you, that's wonderful. The next one, if not, you can at least try getting organic. Again, I think the food sources, again, in the UK and Europe are a bit cleaner than in the US, but still look for that if possible. The ninth one, which I know is maybe hard for some people, but try to grow some of your own food. We are so disconnected from nature as it is. And, you ask a little kid, where'd that spinach come from? And they'll say the store. They won't say from the garden. And even someone who lives in a small apartment or flat, you could have a little windowsill with a couple tomato plants, or you could have a little grow station somewhere. And so I'm not saying you need to have a massive garden, although if you have a lawn and you can do that, I'd say get rid of the lawn and put that garden there. Those foods are going to be the healthiest. You're going to pick them at the ripest point because you're picking them. They haven't been transported anywhere. And you're dealing with the soil. You're lovingly growing them. So those are the best sources. So even if you can just do 2 tomato plants, start there, or a couple spinach plants, or whatever it might be. And then the last one is it's not just about diet. Diet is the number one thing you can do to improve your health. But there are other lifestyle things. We live a sedentary lifestyle. So, I suggest getting up every hour. If you're at work at your computer, get up every hour and do a 5 minute, at what I call exercise snack, rather than a food snack, an exercise snack where you lift some weights or you do some planks or you run up and down the stairs or go on your treadmill or whatever it might be. And then sleep is another factor in that lifestyle where most of us are deficient in sleep. So get better sleep. Dehydration is an issue. Hydrate better. And chronic stress. Find ways to reduce chronic stress. But food's number one. And then these other elements, movement, hydration, sleep, and just
Stress.
lost it.
Stress. Yeah.
Stress. Thank you. Yeah.
I want to go back to the example you gave in terms of healthy fats, well, fats in general being demonized, and then studies coming out debunking that. But it sounds like some sectors within the healthcare system still are skeptical and recommend to people to eliminate like all fats, low fat diet, etc. Why is that the case when they've been debunked? Like there's something in my mind that just doesn't add up, and even like where that came from. I mean, maybe science is always evolving, so maybe at one point that was believed to be the case, and then the science changed on it. Like, great, okay, I can maybe get my head around that. Although the more I'm learning is that actually the food industry has a big say on kind of lots of these studies and kind of science itself. But yeah, kind of go back to my initial question, because I'm kind of ranting now. But was around kind of the if they've been debunked, and if certain MDs or doctors etc are still skeptical, like why is that the case?
That's a great question, but let's start back from the beginning. So first of all, yes, the food lobby is extremely powerful, and there are about 12 companies that really have their tentacles worldwide. A company like Nestle, which is all over the world, Unilever, all over the world. But the sugar industry is also one of the most powerful lobbies, and they have been very protective. So let's go back. So heart attack, let's especially focus on heart disease because that's where it really all started. So prior to the 1900s, heart attacks and heart disease was pretty unknown, rare. Then it started picking up a little bit in the early 90s. In the 90s, our U.S. President Eisenhower had a heart attack in office, and it just created this firestorm. If this former military man, president, most powerful person in the world, blah, 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 can have a heart attack, anybody can have a heart attack. And there was a researcher, Ansel Keys, and I don't know whether it was his ego. There's no proof, no paper trail linking the sugar industry to him, but his research is a little suspect. But he was a bully, and he came out with several research studies and a book, and he shouted louder than everybody else. But he basically said that fat was the cause of heart disease, and we need to eliminate fat from our diet. So that was beginning from the late 50s, early 60s. But researchers go back and look at his data set. What he did, which is very strange, when he talked about sugar, he separated sugar into desserts and candies as one group, and then sugary beverages as a totally separate group, but he lumped all fats together as one, healthy fats and seed oils, unhealthy fats. And so when researchers pulled that data apart, put it back together, so the sugar was one group, not two. The fats had to stay one because they couldn't separate unhealthy to healthy. Then when they did that, sugar was most correlated, had the highest correlation with heart disease. And that study has now been replicated again and again and again. And there was, in 2015, I think it's the seminal case where it finally said there is no correlation with healthy fats and heart disease. Now, unhealthy fats, these seed oils, are unhealthy because of a number of different things. One, they are high in omega-6 and they skew our balance. We should have a balance almost even between omega-3 and omega-6. Omega-3 comes from things like fish, salmon, nuts, some other food sources, but you can also obviously get supplements to do that. Omega-6, mostly in all these seed oils. And so we have this big imbalance because, again, soybean oil is the number one oil used in ultra-processed foods in the U.S., and I'm not sure if that's worldwide or not, but it's It's the cheapest because it's subsidized in the US, and so it's in everything. And so we have this crazy imbalance between omega-3 and omega-6. The other problem with omega-6 is they're inflammatory. And one of our big problems with our health is chronic inflammation. And so that's the other issue with these seed oils. And so this is the problem, and this is why we need to fix our food system. So that's where it went. These healthy fats. I'm not sure about butter. I'd say butter maybe because there are some people that are very against dairy, and so maybe they lump butter into that category. But grass-fed butter from pastured cows is one of the healthiest fats. Avocado, like I said, avocado is one. Some people have a problem calling certain foods superfoods, and I sort of do because it depends on the person. Avocado might be a superfood for me, but you might be allergic to an avocado, so it wouldn't be for you, obviously. But avocados and avocado oil is sort of close to a superfood. Eggs the same way because the nutrients are in eggs. I don't know why. So the research back then was skewed. Yes, there's a classic case of Harvard researchers being paid off by the sugar industry to do research where their research findings amazingly found that sugar wasn't a cause of any health problems, but unfortunately they got caught and the sugar industry pulled the money and it never got out. Yeah, food and sugar have dominated some of these research studies, so that's part of the problem too. Even some recent studies, there's a recent study that erythritol was dangerous. It's a sugar substitute. And if you look at the funding, it doesn't directly come from the sugar industry, but it comes from, if you follow this money trail, it basically comes from the sugar industry because they, of course, want to demonize anything that's, a substitute to sugar. So, yeah, so I'd say for people tuning in, if you see a study on it in the headlines, dig deeper. Don't just believe the headline that's clickbait that says, "Oh yes, all fats are bad," or "Don't eat eggs anymore," or whatever it might be. Go deeper and find where that, who did that study, who funded it, most importantly.
How do you recommend people kind of like navigate all of this? Because I think like when they're making those choices and those decisions, especially if they do live, and most of us do live like this very much busy, stressful lifestyle. I think when we're making these choices, we're not like our most conscious best selves, right? Like if we were our most conscious best selves, I have hope, maybe I'm also naive, that we would make better choices most of the time. Maybe again, I could be being naive there, but when we are kind of caught up in this cycle, it's just for convenience, right? It's just easier to get the fast food, etc., etc. So and like with all this health information, like sometimes even I felt like overwhelmed by it all. So what's like the mindset or the prism or like what kind of recommendations do you have for people to navigate this?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I thought you were going to say it right at the end with mindset, but I would say mindful shopping, mindful eating. We are spending the lowest amount of our household budget on food right now. And so my our overarching philosophy is we need to think about food as an investment in our health and our longevity and the health of our children, grandchildren. And if we don't think of food as an investment, then we start saying, oh, well, why should I buy that regeneratively grown food, which is much more expensive than that cheap version over there. But when we see health as an investment, we say, oh, well, I'll spend more now so I don't have to spend more in healthcare or in prescription drugs or in surgery or in hospital bills down the road. And so health as an investment is number one, but then just that mindfulness. I'll give you an example from myself. When I was still dealing with my trauma-fueled self, I had two jobs. I was teaching at the university, but I was also had my own business, and I would drive this one route, and there was a fast food place right there on the way home, and it was so easy to turn in there because I didn't have time. I knew, my kids would be happy with it, and I wouldn't hear any complaining, and I could get them done, fed, get the homework, and on and on. And I literally had to change the route I took home when I finally decided I needed to do something differently. I needed to, because again, you get into this groove, right? Same thing with shopping. When I know I have to do my weekly shopping at the grocery store, I want to get in and out as fast as I can because I got a million other things going on. And I just mindlessly grab the things I always grab and get out of the checkout and off I go. Or I, do it through DoorDash or whoever else, delivers it to me. And mindfulness, it is going to take more time. I get that, but it's an investment. Remember that. It's a health investment. So it means time too, not just money. And I think if you just start reading the ingredients label and just stop buying anything with more than 5 ingredients or with ingredients that you can't even pronounce or have no idea what they even mean, that's the greatest start you can do. And then meal planning and prep. My mom was cooked when I was a kid, cooked for the family, and she kept a spreadsheet. And after she died, we found a whole box filled with like years of these things. But she kept a spreadsheet. So on Friday night, for Saturday, they always shopped on Saturday. She would plan the week ahead, all the meals and leftovers and school lunches and whatever. And then Sunday, they buy it Saturday. Sunday was prep. So she usually did a roast, which meant you could have at least one day of leftovers, sometimes two, and then just planned out that whole meal. Same thing with lunches. Some people prep their 5 days of work lunches on Sunday, put them in the freezer or fridge, and they have that. They just grab it out and as they're heading to work. So to me, it is a mindset. It's mindset, and then it's just mindfulness that you're going to have on your days off, whatever days off they are. You are going to have to do a little planning and prepping, and you can use other tools like crock pots or Instapots or things like that for bigger meals. But like I said, there's so many easy meals you could do in under 30 minutes or especially under an hour. You don't have to do these gourmet meals. One last thing about mindfulness too is, especially if you are living alone, mindful eating. So many of us, as
Mm,
you said, are on the go, we're rushing. It's lunchtime, but I need to check my email. So I'm eating as I'm checking my email or watching a video. And then all of a sudden, whoa, did I eat anything? I don't even remember, what I ate. So mindful eating, we don't have to do that thing like they talked about decades ago of chewing, 80 times or whatever that adage was. But just think about the food as you're eating it. That slows you down and it will make you feel fuller faster. So you're not going to be over consuming as well.
that, for me anyway, links to like the relationship we have with our food. And I think that that's been hijacked. How do you think like we can start to, I mean, kind of our conversation so far, I can point to a few actions that we can take to maybe start to improve that relationship, but would love to kind of go there if you have any other insights and wisdom around like how we can start to improve the relationship with our food, because I think that's a big part of the conversation, right? We'll get back talking to Randall in just one moment, but before we do so, I would just like to take a quick break to mention Real Superfoods. Real Superfoods is on a mission to help people live happier, healthier lives through the power of superfoods like matcha, cacao, ashwagandha, and many others. I've shared many times that I love their magic matcha and cocoa dream blends, and their superfood bars aren't half bad either. I love their blends not just for their quality and taste, but most importantly, how they make me feel, which is at my best. And unlike many food brands and companies out there today, I believe that Real do things in the right way for human health. Don't just take my word for it. Head on over to Real Superfoods today by visiting the link in the show note description and using code RC20, that's code RC20 for 20% off your first order so that you can try Real Superfoods blends and or superfood bars for yourself and let me know how you get on. Now though, let's get back to my conversation with Dr. Randall Hansen.
Yeah, I agree. We use food as for when we're sad or angry or upset for comfort, and we use food when we're celebrating, like, hey, let's have a birthday or an anniversary or whatever, and or the holidays. Let's just pick out. And it's the food industry. I have to tell you, loves it, encourages it, wants you to do more, wants you to buy more, and so and one other thing also about this is sugar. We know from studies done with brain scans hits the same reward center as drugs like cocaine. So we get a really strong dopamine hit from sugar. So sugar is an addictive substance, and so I will tell you that for some people, it's about 10 to 12% of the population, they actually get withdrawal symptoms if they try to quit sugar just cold turkey. I mean, it's scary. But I'd say for everyone, the number one thing I would say to try to rebuild your relationship with food is first, again, see food as medicine, as something to for your health, not emotional crutch, but for your health. And then you'll be amazed that at your taste buds. Right now, your taste buds have been hijacked also. And so I had someone just tell me this the other day. They had gone without sugar for only about 2 months, and their work had a party, and they had a piece of cake, and they took one bite 'cause they wanted to be polite, and it was so sickening to them how sweet it was. And so I think you'll rediscover some of the wonderfulness of food by changing your diet in this way, changing how you look at food, how you approach food, because all of a sudden things like apples, maybe weren't as sweet as that cake or candy before, but now that you've eliminated those things, that apple will be like, oh my gosh, it's so amazing, the flavor and the taste. To me, that's the biggest thing, is looking at food as a source of energy and health for yourself, not having to conform to 3 meals a day. Back many decades ago, a cereal company made this tagline that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And I still, and totally just an ad, just a commercial, no science behind it. And I still see nutritionists posting about that today. Oh yes, make sure you have breakfast. And of course, the breakfast they typically have are things like cereal, orange juice or apple juice, and a coffee with a lot of sugar in it. And so again, that's basically breakfast or dessert for breakfast. Now, if you have eggs and a slice of steak or something like that, or other healthy breakfast, that's fine. One of the ways we can improve our health, though, is something intermittent fasting, which is something that's kind of trendy right now, but also seems to really help our mitochondria, which is our energy source within our body. And so a simple way to do that is just skip breakfast. Go from dinner the night before to skipping eating until lunch the next day. But again, so yeah, just reframing how we look at food and how we approach food. I think home cooking helps with that too, because I cook most of my meals at home, and I don't know. It's just a joy to me, and I don't see food as comfort or whatever. I just see food as the nutrients that I'm putting together to make this meal.
I love so much of what you said there, and it follows on from one of my last episodes when I was talking with another health coach around. So it kind of came up around like our taste buds, etc. And I was sharing how, like, if now I would go back and eat like a Mars bar or something, I would find that so sickly and probably wouldn't be able to finish it, right? And it's like, actually, when we start to eat real food, and like, we change, right? I feel eating real food but also having a closer relationship with my food, as you're saying there, cooking, etc., and just being more involved in the process has overall improved like that area of my life, the nutrition aspect, tenfold. And I think, as alluded to, we're so kind of disconnected from that we think the piece of cake is like food and not the apple, right? And so yeah, I feel like it's about becoming more connected with the food that we're eating. So yeah, can definitely resonate with that, which leads me on to one of like my other points, was social pressure. Where does social pressure fit into this? Because you alluded to a client there at a birthday party, had a bit of cake because wanted to be, quote unquote, like nice and, like not disrespectful, etc. But that's something that I think like we've all experienced, and it's interesting because today I was somewhere and they had a Christmas pie, right? But guess what? All the food options were like ultra processed food, And then there's me bringing along kind of my own food, which was soup, actually. I made soup, right? And I kind of felt like a bit of like an outcast, I guess, a bit. But it's like, actually, in a way, like, this is what kind of has to happen if we want to take back control of our health, right? And it's a little bit sad that, from a societal level, at that Christmas party, like, there's not other healthier options, and it's like all processed food, right? But in that kind of context, like, I kind of understood that that's where they're operating from, their level of consciousness, etc. And it just like health is very important to me, one of my number one values. And so if in that situation I'm seen as weird or like an outcast or like not joining in or like whatever it is, like so be it, because I value my health. So I want to explore in terms of if you have any insights or wisdom around like the social pressure aspect and how that affects our food choices.
I think the I love it, by the way, Lou, because I feel you on that one. I have a group, a nonprofit group I volunteer with, and every meeting is ultra processed snack food, and it's just disgusting. And I think it's just funny where if you brought an apple, people would look at you like, "Oh, you're weird," as they stuff down a cupcake or something. It's like, no, I think it's the other way around. I think it's hardest with our children, and because every birthday in elementary school or primary school, there cakes and cupcakes and all these things, and if you're the kid that's like, oh no, I can only have an apple or carrots or whatever, there's a lot of problems there. I think as adults we have a brilliant chance to educate. Yeah, we might get strange looks at first, and people like, what's going on? But then when they ask the question, it gives us the opportunity without, hopefully not getting too high on our soapbox, but, gives us an opportunity to educate them a little bit. I have friends now that the first time I was going over to dinner at their house, they asked me like 50 questions, like, what can we make? And what are ingredients? And I was like, it's not that hard. It's not, it was not a list, it's just, especially if you're making it from scratch, that's probably the number one thing. And then now I go over there and they're proud. They're like, look at this meal we made, and we didn't even have to ask you about it. And look at these ingredients. And to me, that's a big win when we can start influencing the people around us, because it's health and food and nutrition and holistic healing are being talked at maybe this level. And again, that's why I love what you're doing and others in all realms that are trying to get this message. But the food companies and marketers are up here, and so the message is so much louder of these. No, there's no problem with all these wonderful sickening sweet and chemically enhanced food products. I call them imposter foods, by the way, because to me they're not real food, they're imposters. But yes, I'd say number one, what I do is, yeah, I either, if I'm going to an event which I know is going to be conventional, I'll have my meal or light snack before I go, so I'm not hungry or tempted, because I think being tempted, especially early in the process, is a harder thing than the social aspect. But then, yeah, or I'll bring some nuts or some veggies or something like that. I haven't brought soup, but I love that idea because I do love soup. And then sometimes there are some things around the edges that we can still eat, or like I said, do like this other person did, take a slice of cake to be polite, but then pick at it or pretend to or whatever, so you're not seen that way. Or like I said, just speak up about it and be an advocate and just say, listen, you all are fine to eat what you want to eat, but I've recently discovered the problems with ultra processed foods or with sugars, and I'm trying to focus on my health. And so I would try to go with the educational route, but I agree there will be some social awkwardness when people see you not eating the food, or having your soup when they're having something else.
Yeah, and I've just kind of learned that that's in a way like a small price that I'm sure many other people do it, that we have to pay when we are choosing a less conventional lifestyle, right? And like that little bit of awkwardness in the beginning. It's just the price that we have to pay. Interestingly, have you come across fellow podcaster, much bigger in the game, but US based, author as well, Sean Stevenson? He has a
I know
podcast
the
that's
name,
called,
but I haven't been
yeah,
on. Yeah.
yeah, he has a podcast called The Model Health Show. Would definitely recommend people checking that out. His books as well is great. He's got a free Eat Smarter, Sleep Smarter, and then like the Eat Smarter Family Cookbook. And why I reference that is because one of his mantras or kind of things that he says, principles, is that to like upgrade the quality of like some of our favorite foods, right? So you alluded there in terms of the cake. Now you can have a conventional cake, or you can make the cake at home. Maybe use, instead of a really refined flour, use like an almond flour or something, a healthier alternative. And so it's interesting because like when people come to mind, like that, those are like the ingredients that I use, to always try to like make stuff from scratch, etc. And it's interesting because like most of the time like people can't really tell the difference, I mean, sometimes there is a difference in terms of it might not be as sweet, but it's not like they're eating it and they're going like, oh, this is bloody disgusting or something, right? And so that was kind of interesting because I think like sometimes we have like this perception in our mind a bit, but yeah, it's just kind of like this kind of concept. And that's how I got into more cooking my own foods and being in the kitchen more, was like, actually, sometimes I might want that chocolate brownie, right, for dessert, right? But I'm using much better quality ingredients than if I went to my local supermarket or fast food restaurant and got a brownie or a cookie or something from there, making it from home using ingredients. So, what's your take on upgrading the quality of our food so we can still maybe enjoy some of our favorite foods in moderation, but it's the ingredients that therefore matter?
Yeah, I love that. I agree completely. I had a little Thanksgiving event over here a couple weeks ago with a group, and I made my, for lack of a better word, keto chocolate chip cookies, so low carb cookies, and didn't say what they were, just put them out there on a plate, and I was almost shocked. That was a little unusual. They were like maybe my best batch, but some people came up to me and said, "Wow, these are fantastic. You're not eating these, are you?" And I'm sure I'm eating these because I know the ingredients and I bake them. And so everyone was asking for the recipe. So you're right. When I first started doing, when I eliminated sugar way back, 22 years ago, and the low carb options back then were kind of cardboard and chemically, and now we have with almond flour. They do brown sugar erythritol, which I absolutely love for baking. Even just, even if they baked, my mom was a baker. I mean, growing up, I had cookies in tins, cupcakes in tins all the time, but it was from good ingredients and when they weren't store bought. So again, if you look at like a birthday cake made at home, you'd have eggs of some sort, flour of some sort. I would use almond flour, but the best cake probably would still, for the best in terms of what we think, would be probably white flour. But some kind of dairy or coconut milk, and then some kind of oil. I would use butter, but and that's basically it. But if you buy a store bought cake of those, so that's like 5 ingredients, but the store bought would have 20 ingredients or more because they have to add all these different elements to it to make the icing perfect, to make the cake airy enough. And so yeah, just cooking from scratch in your own home, just experimenting with that, just playing around with it, to say, if you've never used almond flour, say, well, I'm going to take this traditional recipe and try almond flour instead of the baking flour, and maybe I'll try this erythritol or allulose or stevia or one of these other sweeteners and do that. And it's amazing. Yeah, so just upgrading some of those ingredients. And I would say again, so if you can afford butter over margarine, that would be a massive upgrade. Almond flour, some people use coconut flour also instead of wheat flour. And then quality eggs if you can. Obviously, if a neighbor is growing them or a local farm stand, those are the best. But again, the higher the quality of the eggs, and just go from there. But yeah, that just raising the food quality will improve your energy, your outlook, your mental health, everything.
That's interesting because that brings up like another question in my mind of like the change, like what's actually happened to our food supply system. And kind of what I mean by that is like if I had like a conversation with, and I actually have, with like my parents, etc. It's not like biscuits or these kind of chocolate bars wasn't around when they were growing up, but the rate of chronic disease wasn't at where it is now. And so I'm sure like these products still had sugar in them. So it's like, actually, what's actually changed? Is it all of the other chemicals that actually none of us really know what they are? Like when I look at it, I'm like, actually, what is that? Is it that's with the sugar, with the seed oils, that's like flaring the chronic disease? So like, I feel like looking at it from like more of a observer point of view, like something's obviously changed, or maybe it's a few things that's changed, because it's not like a biscuit is like a new invention, right? Like, and yeah, when my parents were growing up, they still had these foods, but yeah, I don't know, I'm kind of waffling a bit. Like something's kind of changed because they didn't have the rate of chronic diseases we do now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, and you're absolutely right. And it does make us sound a little bit like conspiracy theorists, but the facts are there. If you look at from the 1980s forward, starting in the US, but then the standard American diet is spread, worldwide. But from the 1980s, you see, before the 1980s, insulin resistance, diabetes, heart disease, all these dementia were all kind of flat, maybe slightly rising. In the 1980s, we could see this spike, and it just keeps going to where we are today. And you're absolutely right. Yeah, like I said, my mom baked sweet stuff all the time as a kid. We weren't we weren't fat, obese. We didn't have health problems. We didn't have diabetes as wow, so many children today do. And part of the problem is, like I said, is that we are just consuming dessert for every meal where we didn't do that in the past. So that's number one. Seed oils, it's so funny. I'm a kind of a newer convert to seed oils. I didn't pay attention as much in the past. I didn't have that much fried food, so I didn't think about it that much. But you look at just the process to make seed oils, which goes through this pulverizing the seeds, whether they're soybeans or sunflower seeds or canola, rapeseed, and then they bleach them and they put them through with a solvent to clarify, and it comes out. It truly is an industrial process. And again, if you look at that chart, seed oil domination from seed oils were introduced back in the early 1900s, but really the only seed oil that maybe was something was Crisco. And then food manufacturers are always using the cheapest ingredients, which, again, makes sense if they're for profit, but I think they put profits over our health, but that's a whole discussion. But so the cheapest ingredients, so seed oils are cheap. So let's do that. They also switched sugar with other sugars like high fructose corn syrup, which is the cheapest sugar, again, because corn in the US is subsidized. And again, it's an after product. It's a byproduct. And so we have seed oils, we have high fructose corn syrup, and yes, and then we have thousands of chemicals that food companies can legally add to their products. Some of them have been tested, many have not been, but they're generally accepted as safe. And so, yeah, so that's why, back to what I said, I call that biscuit today, I call that, if it's not homemade, I call that an imposter biscuit. It's not the same biscuit that your parents bought, 30, 40 years ago. It's been modified. They've changed the ingredients. That cookie in the store is not that same cookie. All these things, even, I said, even crackers, it's so amazing to me. Salad dressings, tomato sauce have sugar in them. And it just blows my mind. Why are we putting sugar in all these things? But we're putting in there because, again, the sugar lobby is also powerful. And the other thing with ultra processed foods is they strip the fiber out. So that's the other big thing. That's what's leading to a lot of the cancers in my mind, especially the colon cancers, because we're not eating enough fiber. So they strip the fiber out, and they strip the fiber out of these foods because fiber is filling. And so if they keep the fiber in, we only might eat 5 crisps. But if they take the fiber out, we'll eat 20 crisp or 30 crisp. And so we're eating more, and we're eating more with bad ingredients. I think those are the two big factors.
From my perspective, it seems like one of the main solutions to this, and I've had other guests on that have kind of spoken about this, is for each of us individually to become the CEO of our own health and aware of like the choices that we're making, and to own that. Because I think like from a societal level, sometimes I like to keep optimistic, be an optimist, etc. But with all these forces, sometimes it feels like running against us. It's like, actually, I can control if another McDonald's pops up in my local area and and obviously that's going to tempt me. But what I can control is if I actually step into that fast food restaurant, etc. So the more I have these conversations right now, the more it kind of points to me that one of the main solutions to this is, on an individual basis, and owning our choices and decisions and making more health conscious ones. What's your thoughts on that?
I love that. I love being the CEO of your health, because that does put a different perspective, and I love that maybe that means you will value yourself more. But you're right. I have a friend who sends me emails like at least once a week saying, you need to do more to fight this system. And, you need to be burning food at a local grocery store or whatever. Or that new McDonald's, stand in front of the bulldozer. But those things won't work. Yes, it could work to some degree, but it's an individual. I love that you're talking about it, because we can control us. We can control what I eat, and I can control what my family eats, especially since I'm cooking it. But beyond that, and just be aware that, the food marketers know all the tricks to convince us, plant-based. I have some friends who are vegan and they're like, well, as long as it's plant-based, it's healthy. And I'm like, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
That Mars bar is plant-based, but that's not healthy. And some of these fake meats are, I think now there's doing a couple new generations that will be healthier, but some of these fake meats are so unhealthy. Whether it says plant-based or natural or heart healthy, ignore that. So yeah, as CEO of your own health, you're going to have to cut through some of this stuff, but I love that idea. I love the perspective because we're not going to change the world, but we can change it one person at a time. We can change it with ourselves, our spouse, our partner, children, whatever, our neighbors, our friends, and go that way.
Randall, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast and discussing this. What's one thing that we didn't talk about when it relates to the topics that we have spoken about? We're obviously really dialing in on nutrition and food that we should have spoken about that people need to know.
I think that one thing that I would love to mention just quickly is I'm also working with a nonprofit. It's starting in the States, but we hope to be worldwide at some point to transform school meals because studies show that adults consume about two-thirds or about half to two-thirds of ultra-processed foods, but children consume 70% or more of their diets ultra-processed foods, and a lot of that comes from the school systems. And so one of my big things is, we need to change that back. We need to have this foundation, this nonprofit's going to bring growing gardens of produce, apple trees, whatever the school wants, onto school grounds, into school buildings, wherever it takes, so that those foods can be used in the school cafeterias for their meals to improve the nutrition of kids. Because again, that's the future. We're seeing cancers for people in their 30s that weren't normally found in people into their 60s and 70s. And it's the food and lifestyle that's doing it. So we got to start looking at the children too.
Yeah, super important. So yeah, we'd love to be kept up to date with the work you're doing there. But where should people go if they want to keep up to date with everything that you've currently got going on, social medias, website? Yeah, where's the best place?
LinkedIn by far is the best place to find me. Pretty easy to do. Dr. Randall Hansen, I should come right up. I post on other social media as well. I do Instagram and X and Facebook, but LinkedIn by far. You can find all those connections on my website, which is randallshansen.com. And if you're interested in the book, the latest book, which also has some free articles you can read first before you even buy the book or don't even buy the book, it's healingrevolutiondiet.com.
Randall, thank you so much. We'd love to have you back on the podcast in the future and continue our conversation. I'm sure there's lots of other things to discuss, not only when it comes to nutrition, but other areas of our health, because as you well know, our health, our nutrition is linked with the other areas of our health and vice versa. It's a much holistic approach, and so I would have to kind of dive into that. But for now, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Luke. Appreciate your time and just happy to be here.
I hope that you've enjoyed my conversation today with Dr. Randall Hansen, where we have been talking about health, nutrition, and food, really focusing in on those topics. And it's the last episode of 2024. So I just want to take this moment to say thank you for tuning in and listening to Raising Consciousness this year. It's been a ride, it's been a journey, and I'm really looking forward to next year and all of the plans that I have for the show and the podcast. There's going to be a few changes. That's all I'm going to say on that matter right now, and make you aware that between this episode and the next episode, there might be a little bit of a break with some of those changes coming into forth. In terms of this episode, though, I would love to know what you're taking away from this episode. So do leave a comment. I read every single comment, every single review. And I would also love to know your standout moment or takeaway from all of the episodes this year. So do leave that comment, do leave that review. Once again, I appreciate you being here and tuning into the show. I hope you had a great holiday season. Happy New Year. And I will see you in 2025. See you then.